The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago fell silent as billionaire tech mogul Vanessa Hartwell stood alone at the defense table, her $5,000 suit doing nothing to hide the terror in her eyes. Her entire legal team, 6 attorneys from Ashford & Klein, the most prestigious firm in Illinois, had vanished exactly 7 minutes before her trial was set to begin. 200 cameras from every major news network pointed at her like loaded weapons. Judge Patricia Morgan raised her gavel, her face set in grim determination, and Vanessa's hands trembled against the polished oak table. Then a voice cut through the whispers rippling across the courtroom, "Your Honor, I will defend her." Every head turned toward the back of the courtroom where a black man in a navy blue janitor's uniform stood holding a mop, his weathered hands still gripping the wooden handle. No one in that room knew this janitor was about to expose the biggest corporate conspiracy Chicago had seen in 20 years. Where in the world are you tuning in from? Comment your location. Like if this hit, share with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe plus turn on notifications so we stay locked in. Jameson Cole had been invisible for 12 years. At 42 years old, he pushed a cleaning cart through the Richard J. Daley Center 5 nights a week, mopping marble floors while lawyers in $1,000 shoes walked past him like he was part of the furniture. His daughter, Zara, was 11 now, smart, curious, with her mother's warm smile and stubborn determination. Jameson worked 2 jobs to keep her in Lincoln Park Academy on the South Side, to make sure she had books, clothes that fit, and a future that looked nothing like his present. What none of his co-workers knew, what none of the attorneys who barely glanced at him understood, was that Jameson Cole had once been one of the most brilliant corporate defense attorneys in Illinois. 12 years ago, he'd had his own practice on West Monroe Street, a reputation that made senior partners nervous, and a track record that was damn near perfect. Then he'd taken on Meridian Pharmaceuticals. He'd represented Angela Ross, a lab technician who discovered that Meridian was suppressing evidence that their best-selling diabetes medication was causing heart failures in elderly patients. Jameson had witnesses. He had internal documents. He had recordings that would have put 3 executives in federal prison. The trial started strong. Then everything fell apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. Witnesses recanted their testimony. Documents disappeared from evidence lockup. His star witness, Angela, died in what police called a random mugging outside her Rogers Park apartment. The Illinois Bar Association accused Jameson of fabricating evidence. He was cleared eventually, but his reputation was destroyed. No firm would touch him. Clients vanished overnight. His wife, Lisa, had been 7 months pregnant with Zara when a hit-and-run driver struck her outside a Jewel-Osco on South Cottage Grove. The police never found who did it. But Jameson knew. He had no proof, but he knew. So he'd quit. He'd taken whatever work he could find, raised Zara alone, and told himself that staying invisible was the same as keeping her safe. For 12 years, that had been enough. Judge Morgan leaned forward over the bench, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. "Excuse me?" Jameson set down his mop and stepped away from his cleaning cart. His work boots squeaked against the polished marble floor as he walked toward the defense table where Vanessa Hartwell stood frozen, her knuckles white against the wooden surface. "I said I will defend her," Jameson repeated, his voice steady now, louder. "I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Illinois." The prosecutor, Lawrence Bennett, a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and a navy suit that probably cost more than Jameson made in 4 months, shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is absurd. This man is the courthouse janitor. He just interrupted a federal proceeding." Judge Morgan raised a hand. "Mr. Cole. Jameson Cole. Mr. Cole, do you have proof of your license?" Jameson reached into the chest pocket of his uniform and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open and produced a laminated card, his Illinois Bar Association license, edges frayed from years of carrying it like a talisman. He walked forward and handed it to the bailiff, who carried it up to Judge Morgan. She studied it for a long moment, her eyebrows lifting. "This shows you were admitted to the Illinois Bar 24 years ago. It's still active, though it notes you haven't practiced in 12 years. She looked up, her gaze sharp and evaluating. "Why is that?" Jameson met her eyes without flinching. "Personal reasons, Your Honor." Lawrence Bennett stepped forward, his face flushed with indignation. Your Honor, Miss Hartwell had a legal team of 6 attorneys from one of the top firms in the city. They withdrew this morning under what I can only describe as highly suspicious circumstances. Now a courthouse custodian wants to represent her in a federal theft case involving proprietary technology worth billions? This is a mockery of our judicial system. Judge Morgan set the card down carefully. She looked at Vanessa, who stood gripping the table like it was the only thing anchoring her to reality. Miss Hartwell, do you consent to this representation? Vanessa turned her head slowly. She looked at Jameson for the first time, really looked at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, mascara smudged beneath them. She studied his face, searching desperately for something, competence, hope, anything that might save her from the disaster closing in from all sides. The courtroom held its collective breath. Then she whispered, "Yes? I do." Judge Morgan exhaled. "Very well, Mr. Cole. You have 48 hours to prepare. We reconvene Thursday morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Court is adjourned." She struck the gavel once, the sound like a gunshot in the tense silence. The courtroom exploded. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Camera flashes turned the room into a strobe light. Vanessa grabbed her designer purse and turned toward the side exit. Jameson followed, 2 burly security guards flanking them as they pushed through the crowd of journalists and photographers. They didn't speak until they were outside. The November wind off Lake Michigan hit them like a physical slap, cutting through Jameson's thin uniform. Vanessa pulled her coat tighter around herself and walked briskly toward a black Tesla Model S waiting at the curb, engine purring. Jameson stayed a few steps behind, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked. She stopped abruptly and turned back. "Get in." Jameson hesitated. "I need to clock out first. My shift." "No." Her voice was steel-wrapped in silk. "Get in now." Jameson climbed into the back seat of the Tesla. The leather was soft, the interior immaculate, a world away from his 15-year-old Honda Civic with its cracked dashboard and persistent check engine light. The car pulled smoothly away from the courthouse, heading north through downtown Chicago's canyon of skyscrapers. Traffic was thick with the lunch hour rush, but Vanessa's driver navigated it expertly. For 5 long minutes, neither of them spoke. Vanessa stared out the tinted window, her jaw tight, her hands clasped in her lap. Jameson watched the city blur past, the Willis Tower piercing the gray November sky, tourists bundled against the cold on Michigan Avenue, the Chicago River reflecting the overcast afternoon like tarnished silver. Finally, Vanessa spoke, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Why did you do that?" Jameson looked at his hands. They were rough, scarred from years of manual labor, pushing mops, lifting trash bags, scrubbing toilets in buildings where people like Vanessa made decisions that moved markets. "I don't know." "That's not an answer." He looked up and met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "I've been cleaning that courtroom for 3 years. I've watched you sit through every hearing, every deposition, every pretrial motion. I've seen your lawyers argue and file briefs and cross-examine witnesses." He paused. "And I've seen them lose. Badly." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "They didn't lose. They quit." "Same result." She turned to face him fully, anger flashing in her dark eyes. "Do you know who I am?" "Vanessa Hartwell. You run SolarNova Technologies. You developed some kind of breakthrough solar cell that could cut energy costs by 70% within 5 years. And now Titan Energy Corporation is trying to bury you with a bogus theft charge because your technology threatens to destroy their $40 billion fossil fuel empire." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "How do you know it's bogus?" "Because I read the case files." "How?" Jameson shrugged. "I clean the courthouse at night. Judges leave documents on their desks. Lawyers forget to lock filing cabinets. I have access to places most people don't even know exist." He met her gaze steadily. "And I have insomnia. Lots of time to read." The car pulled up to a sleek glass tower on North Lake Shore Drive, its 42 stories reflecting the choppy gray waters of Lake Michigan. The driver opened Vanessa's door. She stepped out, then looked back at Jameson. "Come on. We have work to do." The penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the lake stretching to the horizon. The furniture was aggressively modern: white leather couches, steel-frame chairs, abstract art that probably cost more than Jameson earned in 5 years. Everything was pristine, cold, perfect. Vanessa walked directly to a massive dining table buried under cardboard boxes. She gestured to them like a general surveying a battlefield. "That's everything. Contracts, emails, financial records, lab reports, patent applications. Ashford's team went through it all and told me we had no case." Her voice cracked slightly. "You have 48 hours to find something they missed." Jameson set down his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "I'll need coffee." "Kitchen's that way." He started with the emails. Thousands of them, meticulously organized in thick 3-ring binders with color-coded tabs. He scanned each one methodically, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that felt wrong. The technical language was dense: photon efficiency rates, quantum dot configurations, semiconductor substrate analysis, but Jameson had always excelled at seeing what others missed. Then he found it. A thread between Vanessa and her former chief technology officer, a woman named Brianna Yu. In the early emails from 3 years ago, Brianna had been enthusiastic, almost reverent. She'd called Vanessa's work revolutionary and world-changing. She'd used phrases like, "This will transform everything and you're a genius." But halfway through the correspondence, around 18 months ago, the tone shifted dramatically. Brianna's language became formal, distant, almost cold. The warmth evaporated. Then, 6 months later, the emails stopped entirely. Just nothing. Jameson pulled Brianna's employment contract from another box. Standard terms for a tech executive: salary, benefits, stock options. But buried near the end, in dense legal language that most people would skim over, was a non-compete provision that made his attorney instincts flare like a warning siren. 7 years. Brianna was prohibited from working in renewable energy research for 7 years after leaving Solanova. That was extraordinarily unusual. Most non-competes ran 2 years maximum, and courts routinely struck down anything longer as unreasonable restraint of trade. Why would Vanessa's lawyers, supposedly top-tier corporate attorneys, agree to such an aggressive provision? Jameson opened his laptop and searched for Brianna Yu's name. Her LinkedIn profile loaded quickly. According to it, she'd left Solanova in April of the previous year. The departure was described vaguely as pursuing new opportunities. 3 months later, she joined Titan Energy Corporation as a strategic technology consultant. Jameson leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. It was past midnight now. Vanessa sat across the table, reviewing financial statements with fierce concentration, occasionally making notes in the margins. She hadn't given up. Even after her lawyers abandoned her, even facing public humiliation and potential federal prison, she kept fighting. He thought about Angela Ross, the whistleblower he'd failed to protect 12 years ago. He thought about Lisa, about all the people crushed by corporations with unlimited resources and no conscience. He stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched out below, a grid of lights and shadows, millions of people sleeping while decisions that would affect their lives were made in rooms like this. By 4 in the morning, he'd found it. A series of internal emails from Titan Energy, buried deep in a discovery dump labeled Miscellaneous Correspondence, Low Priority. The emails were between Robert Callahan, Titan's CEO, and a man named Vincent Cross, who appeared to be some kind of consultant or fixer. The subject line read, "Hartwell situation, next steps." Jameson's hands started shaking as he clicked it open. Callahan had written, "We need to move faster. Her technology could destroy our market share within 3 years. If that solar cell goes mainstream, we're looking at $40 billion in losses minimum. How do we stop it?" Vincent Cross had replied, "Legal route is cleanest. We have you on payroll now. She can copy the research data, and will claim Hartwell stole it from us. Frame it as corporate espionage. Media will eat it up. Public loves a fallen tech hero story." There were more emails. Plans to bribe expert witnesses. Discussions about paying off Vanessa's lawyers to sabotage her defense from the inside. references to contingency measures if the lawsuit didn't work, measures that made Jameson's blood run cold. He printed everything with trembling hands. Then he called across the room. "Vanessa!" She looked up from her work, exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "What time is it?" "Late." He walked over and spread the printed emails across the table like evidence at a crime scene. "You need to see this." She read them slowly, her face draining of color with each page. When she finished, she looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "They planned this from the very beginning." "Yes. My lawyers knew." It wasn't a question. "Almost certainly. That's why they left." She stood abruptly and walked to the windows, her reflection ghostly in the dark glass. "My technology works, Mr. Cole. It's real. I've spent 8 years developing it, mortgaged everything I owned, turned down buyout offers that would have made me rich." Her voice cracked. "Do you know what it could do? It could provide clean energy to millions of people. It could help stop climate change. It could change everything." She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "And they want to kill it because it threatens their profit margins." Before Jameson could respond, Vanessa's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, and her face went completely white. She picked it up with shaking hands and showed Jameson the screen. It was a photo of a young girl with braids and a purple backpack, walking through the front doors of a school building. Jameson's heart stopped. That was Zara. That was Longwood Elementary. Below the photo, a message appeared, "Cute daughter. Would be a shame if something happened to her." A second message followed immediately, "Walk away from this case, Mr. Cole. Or she won't have a father anymore." Vanessa stared at Jameson, horror and guilt warring in her eyes. "You should leave. Right now. I'll find someone else. I can't. I won't let them hurt your daughter because of me." Jameson's hands were shaking. He thought about Zara, her laugh when he made terrible dad jokes, the way she concentrated on her homework with her tongue between her teeth, how she'd hugged him that morning before school and told him she loved him. He thought about Lisa, about how he'd failed to protect her 12 years ago. He looked at Vanessa. "No. They're threatening your daughter, Mr. Cole." "I know." "Then why would you?" "Because if I walk away now, I'm teaching her that the right thing to do is run when things get hard. I'm teaching her that people with power always win. I'm teaching her that justice doesn't matter." He picked up his briefcase and the stack of printed emails. "I won't do that." He pulled out his phone and called his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly Korean woman who'd helped him with Zara since Lisa died. "Mrs. Chen, I need Zara to stay with you for the rest of the week. Don't let her go to school. Tell her it's a special vacation. I'll explain everything later." Mrs. Chen asked no questions. "She'll be safe with me, Jameson. You do what you need to do." Jameson didn't sleep. He went home that morning, packed a bag for Zara, and dropped it at Mrs. Chen's apartment in their Bronzeville building. Then he returned to the courthouse in his janitor uniform. Co-workers whispered and pointed. Some laughed behind their hands. One paralegal he'd never spoken to smirked and said, "Good luck playing lawyer, janitor man." Jameson kept walking. That night, he and Vanessa worked until 3 in the morning, building their strategy. They had the emails. They had the evidence of the conspiracy. Now they needed to expose it in a way the jury couldn't ignore. By Wednesday evening, they were ready. Thursday morning arrived cold and gray. Jameson put on his only suit, 15 years old, bought for Lisa's funeral, slightly tight in the shoulders but clean and pressed. He met Vanessa outside the courthouse at 8:30. She wore a charcoal gray suit with no jewelry, her hair pulled back in a simple bun. She looked calm, but Jameson could see the fear in her eyes. "Ready?" she asked. "No," Jameson said. "But we're going anyway." The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Every seat filled, reporters standing shoulder to shoulder along the back wall, camera crews waiting outside like wolves. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a spectacle. The story of the billionaire and the janitor had gone viral overnight. Judge Morgan entered, and everyone stood. She took her seat and looked directly at Jameson. "Mr. Cole, are you prepared to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor." Then let's begin. Mr. Bennett, call your first witness. Lawrence Bennett stood, confidence radiating from him like cologne. He was playing to the cameras, to the jury, performing like an actor who knew all his lines. The prosecution calls Dr. Malcolm Stevens. A man in his 60s walked to the witness stand with the bearing of someone who'd testified hundreds of times. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and a grey suit that screamed academic authority. He was sworn in and sat down, perfectly composed. Bennett smiled warmly. Dr. Stevens, can you tell the court about your background? I have a doctorate in electrical engineering from Stanford University. I've spent 35 years working in renewable energy systems. I've consulted for the Department of Energy, NASA, and several Fortune 500 corporations including General Electric and Tesla. And are you familiar with the technology at the center of this case? I am. I conducted a thorough review of the quantum dot solar cell system developed by Miss Hartwell's company, SolarNova. I also reviewed similar research conducted by Titan Energy Corporation. And what did you conclude? Stevens adjusted his glasses with practiced precision. Miss Hartwell's system is nearly identical to proprietary research that Titan conducted 4 years ago. The photon capture architecture, the quantum dot coating methodology, even the efficiency algorithms, they match almost perfectly. In my professional opinion, this isn't coincidence or parallel development. It's theft. The courtroom murmured. Reporters scribbled furiously. The jury leaned forward, fascinated. Vanessa's hands tightened into fists under the table, her knuckles white. Bennett walked back to his seat with a satisfied smile. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Morgan looked at Jameson. Mr. Cole, your witness. Jameson stood. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He hadn't cross-examined anyone in 12 years, but the old rhythm was still there, waiting in his bones like muscle memory. He picked up a folder and approached the witness stand slowly, deliberately. Dr. Stevens, you said you have a doctorate in electrical engineering from Stanford, is that correct? Yes. And you've worked in renewable energy systems for 35 years. That's right. Jameson opened the folder. Can you tell the court how many peer-reviewed papers you've published specifically on quantum dot solar cell technology? Stevens blinked, his confidence flickering for just a moment. I'm not a quantum physicist, Mr. Cole. I'm an electrical engineer. The disciplines overlap significantly. How many papers, Dr. Stevens? Quantum solar cells involve electrical engineering principles at their core. How many papers have you published on quantum dot technology? It's a simple question. Stevens shifted in his seat. None specifically on quantum dots, but... Jameson pulled out a document. This is your curriculum vitae, provided to the court during discovery. It lists 62 publications spanning your entire career. He handed it to the judge. Not one of them mentions quantum mechanics, quantum entanglement, photon behavior at the quantum level, or quantum dot applications. He turned back to Stevens. Yet you're presenting yourself as an expert qualified to determine whether quantum dot solar cell technology was stolen. Why is that? Bennett shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. Judge Morgan waved him down without taking her eyes off Stevens. Overruled. Answer the question, Dr. Stevens. Stevens's face was beginning to flush. I consulted extensively with actual quantum physicists on the Titan team. I reviewed their findings and incorporated their expertise into my analysis. Consulted with whom specifically? Colleagues at Titan Energy. So you didn't conduct an independent analysis. You relied entirely on information provided by the company that's suing Miss Hartwell. That's standard practice in consulting work. Dr. Stevens, did Titan Energy Corporation pay you for your testimony here today? The courtroom went absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Stevens's face went from pink to red. I was compensated for my time and expertise. How much? That's confidential. Jameson pulled out another document with a theatrical flourish. This is a bank statement obtained through legal discovery. On February 10th of this year, you received a wire transfer of $425,000 from a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. He handed it to Judge Morgan. That shell company is owned by Titan Energy Corporation. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed like lightning. The jury members looked at each other with wide eyes. Bennett slammed his hand on the table. Objection. Counsel is attacking the witness's character. Judge Morgan raised her hand for silence. Sustained. Mr. Cole, rephrase your question. But Jameson could see the jury's faces. The damage was done. They'd already made up their minds about Dr. Malcolm Stevens. Let me ask you something else, Dr. Stevens. You testified that Miss Hartwell's technology matches Titan's research almost perfectly. Did you actually examine Titan's original research data? I was briefed comprehensively on it. Did you see the lab reports? The test results? The raw experimental data? No. That information is proprietary and protected. So you testified under oath that two technologies are nearly identical, but you've never actually examined one of them. You just took Titan's word for it. Stevens opened his mouth, then closed it. No answer came. Jameson stepped closer. You're not an expert, Dr. Stevens. You're a hired gun. Titan Energy paid you $425,000 to come into this courtroom and lie. Objection. Bennett was on his feet, his face purple with rage. Sustained. Judge Morgan's voice cut through the chaos. Mr. Cole, you will rephrase that statement immediately. Jameson turned to the judge, but his eyes never left Stevens. I withdraw the comment, Your Honor. He looked back at the witness. No further questions. Judge Morgan's expression was ice. Dr. Stevens, I'm ordering a full investigation into your financial relationship with Titan Energy Corporation. You're dismissed. Stevens practically fled the witness stand, his face crimson, his carefully constructed authority shattered into pieces. The trial continued for 2 more grueling days. Jameson dismantled every witness the prosecution called. Each paid expert, each bought testimony, each fabricated piece of evidence, he tore through them all like a man possessed. The courtroom became his stage, and 12 years of silence transformed into a symphony of righteous fury. On the morning of the 3rd day, Jameson called his final witness. The defense calls Brianna Yu to the stand. A hush fell over the courtroom. The doors opened, and Brianna walked in slowly, her hands trembling violently. She looked terrified, her face pale, dark circles under her eyes, her professional demeanor completely shattered. She wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry, no makeup. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. She was sworn in and took her seat, gripping the armrests of the witness chair like they were the only things keeping her upright. Jameson approached gently, his voice soft. Miss Yu, can you tell the court why you left Solanova Technologies? Brianna's voice was barely audible. Titan Energy threatened my family. I'm sorry, could you speak up for the jury? She took a shaky breath. Titan Energy Corporation threatened my family. Vincent Cross came to my apartment in Wicker Park last March. He knew where my parents lived in Naperville. He knew my father owned a small printing business. He knew my sister taught at an elementary school in Evanston. Tears started rolling down her face. He said if I didn't steal Vanessa's research and testify against her, they would destroy everything my family had built. My father would lose his business. My sister would lose her job. He showed me photos of them. Photos taken from inside their homes. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the reporters had stopped writing. What did you do? Jameson asked quietly. I did what they asked. I copied Vanessa's research. I signed a statement saying she'd stolen technology from Titan, even though I knew it was a lie. Vanessa created everything from scratch. Every algorithm, every innovation, it was all hers. Brianna was sobbing now. I'm so sorry, Vanessa. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. Jameson reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. Miss Yu, what is this? That's everything. Every email between me and Vincent Cross. Every payment they made to my bank account, $250,000 total. Every instruction they gave me about what to say, what to steal, how to sabotage Vanessa's work. She looked directly at the jury. Every crime they committed is on that drive. I recorded everything because I knew someday this would come out, and I wanted proof that they forced me. Jameson handed the drive to the bailiff. Your Honor, I'd like to enter this as evidence. Judge Morgan nodded gravely. So entered. Lawrence Bennett didn't even stand to cross-examine. He just sat there, his expensive suit suddenly looking 2 sizes too large, staring at his table like a man watching his career implode in real time. The jury deliberated for exactly 93 minutes. When they returned, the forewoman, a middle-aged black woman who reminded Jameson of his mother, stood and read the verdict with absolute clarity. In the case of the people of Illinois versus Vanessa Hartwell, on the charge of theft of trade secrets, we find the defendant not guilty. On the charge of corporate espionage, we find the defendant not guilty. On all charges, we find the defendant not guilty. Vanessa's knees buckled. Jameson caught her arm as she nearly collapsed. She turned to him, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you." The courtroom erupted in applause, something Jameson had never seen in a courtroom before. Even Judge Morgan didn't silence them immediately. She let the moment breathe. 2 weeks later, FBI agents arrested Robert Callahan at his Lake Forest estate as he was boarding a helicopter to O'Hare, presumably heading for a private jet and a country with no extradition treaty. Vincent Cross was picked up at his downtown office, led out in handcuffs past the very reporters who'd crucified Vanessa in the media. 3 Titan Energy executives were charged with conspiracy, bribery, witness tampering, and attempted murder after the FBI discovered the threats against Jameson and Zara. Lawrence Bennett resigned in disgrace after investigators found $200,000 in offshore accounts tied to Titan. Titan Energy's stock plummeted 4 to 7% in a single day. Within a month, they'd filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Vanessa's technology was vindicated. Investment offers poured in. 3 countries, Germany, South Korea, and surprisingly, the United Arab Emirates, offered to license her solar cell design. Clean energy wasn't just a dream anymore. It was becoming inevitable. 3 months after the trial, Vanessa called Jameson to her penthouse. He arrived to find her pacing excitedly, papers spread across every surface. "I want to do something," she said without preamble. "For you. For people like you. For everyone the system crushes because they can't afford to fight back." "What do you mean?" "I'm starting a foundation. Legal aid for people who can't afford representation. Single parents fighting corrupt landlords. Workers injured by negligent corporations. Veterans denied benefits they earned." She spoke rapidly, her words tumbling over each other. "I want to call it the Cole Legal Justice Fund. And I want you to run it." Jameson stared at her. "Vanessa, I'm not. Don't say you're not a lawyer. You just destroyed a billion-dollar corporation in federal court. You saved my life, my company, and probably accelerated the clean energy revolution by a decade." She stepped closer. "You're exactly the lawyer people need." He thought about the janitor uniform hanging in his closet. About 12 years of invisibility. About Zara, who'd watched her father find his courage again. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's do it." 6 months later, Jameson stood in front of a modest brick building on South Dearborn Street in the Loop. The sign above the door read, "Cole and Associates, funded by the Cole Legal Justice Fund." Zara stood beside him, now 12 years old, carrying a box of office supplies like she owned the place. She looked up at the sign and grinned. "Does this mean I'm an associate?" Jameson laughed, a real laugh, the kind he hadn't managed in years. "You're 12. You're barely in 7th grade. I can still help. I'm excellent at organizing files. Mrs. Chen says I have a gift." "Fine. You're an unpaid associate. I'll take it." They walked inside together. 3 desks, a small conference room, shelves lined with law books Vanessa had insisted on buying even though everything was digital now. It was small, but it was real. That first week, 53 people called asking for help. Jameson took 11 cases. A single mother in Englewood fighting an unlawful eviction. A construction worker from Pilsen who'd been injured when his employer violated safety regulations. A Marine Corps veteran from Austin denied disability benefits by the VA. People the system had failed. People who reminded him of himself. One evening, after everyone had gone home, Vanessa stopped by. She found Jameson at his desk, reviewing a brief, making notes in the margins just like the old days. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Stepping into that courtroom?" Jameson set down his pen and looked at her. "No. Not even for a second." "Even after everything? The threats, the fear, nearly losing Zara?" "Especially because of that. Because Zara watched her father stop running. She watched him fight for something that mattered." He smiled. "That's worth more than any amount of safety." Vanessa nodded. "Good. Because neither do I." A year later, Cole and Associates had taken 89 cases. They'd won 64 of them. The Cole Legal Justice Fund became one of the most respected legal aid organizations in Illinois. Other lawyers, good ones who'd lost their way or burned out from corporate law, started volunteering. The small office on Dearborn Street expanded into the building next door. Jameson never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. To push a mop while justice was bought and sold around him. Because the moment you forget where you came from, you lose sight of why you started.